good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you're watching from. You are watching Doc and Dean right here on blackdoctor.org in partnership with the African American Wellness Project. We are back. I know last week we were off, and so I know you missed us. So I wanted to just say thank you all for sticking with us and joining us again live this week for after taking a week off. But it has been a busy health weekend, so we have a lot of news that we want to get to you. So a couple things we want to do at the beginning of each show, as we do for each show, we want you to let us know where you're watching from. If you drop that in the comments, just let us know your city, your state, your zip code, your area, your county, whatever you like to represent. You can put your elementary school on there if you want to. So put that in there. Drop that in the comment section. We want you. Thank you, Agnes, for watching from New York. Shout out to you in New York City. So drop that in. Also, if there's some information here that you think is necessary that other people would want to hear, please share this, tag them, let them know that Doc and Dean is here with all of your health news. I see you, Lisa from Maryland. And finally, if you have any questions, health-related questions that you need to get answered, please drop that in the comment section. We want to get your health questions answered because that's what we're here for. We're here to bring you the news and get your questions answered. So I see some of our regulars here watching, Sherry, Lisa, Agnes, all represent New York. So we need some other areas that come on in. Hey, Maurice. He put his high school in there. That is fun. But I'm not the only person here. We got the man of the hour, of the half hour, and that is Dr. Michael Lenore. How are you, sir?
I would get more attention if I was listening, trying to get a question answered or get in on this geographic, identification. But I am a part of this show. I appreciate you saying that. No, good morning. It's been a very busy health week, and one of the reasons we're here is so that we as African Americans can keep up with all of the things that are going on, and certainly with some of the latest issues. So, good morning to all of those who've joined us, and we hope that you'll tell your friends about the fact that you can get the latest health news right here on Doc and Dean.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a big show planned for everybody. So, as if you didn't know, February is Heart Awareness Month, and so we're going to open up a little bit differently. I know we've been talking about COVID, but I know if you're like me, you are COVID fatigued, and so we're going to talk a little bit about heart health awareness. We understand that cardiovascular disease is connected to many other ailments, and it's the number one killer of African Americans, men and women. And so we have to be very, very cognizant and very, very careful to maintain our heart health. So we're going to be talking about heart health. And other thing is we're going to be talking about big news. We know that Coach Brian Flores from the Miami Dolphins, formerly of the Miami Dolphins, filed a big lawsuit against the NFL and 3 other teams about their practices and their hiring practices. And so we're going to talk a little bit about coaching and the impact. We've got a video with Brian Shaw, formerly of the LA Lakers. We've got now with the Clippers as a coach. We got a video of an interview we did with him about coaching. And then finally, of course, we have to give you some updates on what's going on in COVID. We've got some interesting things about COVID and vaccinating kids down to the age of 2. We've got a potential new Omicron variant out there to let you know about. And there's COVID and animals. Going to let you know about that. And we also have some information about COVID and political ideations, which I'm sure you already know, but I've got some facts for you to talk about that. So first off, Doc.
Yeah, let's start talking
about heart health.
Well, this week in the American Heart Association Journal circulation found that people who were at risk for heart disease could dramatically lower that risk if they did 7 things, which the Heart Association calls Life Simple 7. They're pretty much what you already know, but it always helps to simplify things to a list. One is eating a heart healthy diet, moving more. I think that's really one of the keys to reducing the risk of heart disease. Not smoking, maintaining appropriate weight, keeping your blood pressure, your glucose, and your cholesterol. So let me repeat those really quickly. Diet is good, moving, walking, going up steps, doing things like that. That's a second thing. Not smoking, maintaining an appropriate weight. That's always a challenge for all of us. And then keeping blood glucose, cholesterol, and blood pressure levels under control. Well, why is that so important, especially African American men? On average, African American men live to be 69.1 years of age, which is 5 years less than any other demographic. That means white men, white women, and black women. In fact, black women have an average lifespan of 78 years. So that's why I didn't invest in any long-term things because, I might use some of them, but I don't want too many of them left over. But in any event, but it's very serious business. These are things that you can do right now at any age, and that will reduce your risk of heart disease significantly.
Well, we know we've been focusing on that here at Black Doctor, and some of the programming that we have on our channel here is really focusing on much of those areas that you talked about. So we have our exercise programs in the morning, 4 days a week right now. Hopefully we'll get up to 5 days a week. So that could take care of that movement. We also have a show called Veganish, where we talk about healthy eating. And so all of those things, cessation of smoke, we haven't done that, but we've talked about that. And I'm sure as an asthma and allergy specialist, you can really definitely talk about what smoking does to the lungs and how, and to the heart as well. With regards to protecting our heart health. And so I think as Black people live in America, we don't have to talk about all the general day-to-day stressors that we have living in this country. And so we need to do all those other things to help reduce the stress and pressure on our heart. So move, eat right, sleep, and reduce any risky behaviors you might have.
I would like to add one thing to that list, and that is to take more time looking at blackdoctor.org. Because if you look around blackdoctor.org, you have all of the resources that you need to stay healthy in a number of areas, and certainly in the area of the heart. So put that in. Let's call that Doc and Dean 8 simple things that you need to do. But I think on blackdoctor.org, you have all the resources you need to understand what it means to stay healthy.
But we've got a great comment from Sherry. I'm going to put it on screen here. And she said, you all have been providing so much valuable information, and I am very appreciative. So I want to say we're appreciative of you taking the time out and giving us your time each day, Sherry. So we understand that everybody only has 24 hours in a day for you to spend time with us, learning about health and wellness information. It is wonderful. And thank you for that. Because I'm sure you're sharing, because I see the people that you're tagging, and thank you for sharing that with them, because you want your health to be good and you want your friends and family health to be good as well. So thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. So again, as we move into this next portion of the program, again, make sure you're doing all you can. I know you're going to get a lot of heart health information this month. Check into blackdoctor.org, and we're planning on February 21st to have a heart health summit. So we'll have a bunch of speakers and a bunch of panels on heart health. So February 21st, check out here on blackdoctor.org, and we'll go through all of that. Our next topic here, Doc, is interesting. So and it's sports related, but it's also societal related. So Brian Flores was a black head coach in the NFL. He was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins and led a franchise that had been in turmoil to respectability. He had won more games that he lost. And in fact, this season, he led them on like an 8 or almost a 9-game winning streak to make a push for the playoffs after a slow start. Even after all of that, leading them to all of those records, they decided to let go. And then all of this bad press started coming out. Oh, he was difficult to work with. He was uncooperative. He couldn't lead, blah, blah, blah. The smear campaign happened immediately after they fired him, which sent up the red flag because everybody was like, this guy was a great coach. This week, he files a lawsuit with the NFL alleging, let's just say, discriminatory hiring practices, because he had an interview with the New York Giants and where he found out through text messages that they already had a selection even before he had his second interview. They already hired their coach. And so he realized that his interview was really just to satisfy the requirement that the NFL has that they interview a minority coach. And he alleges that the Denver Broncos did him the same way, and they weren't professional because they already had their coach selected. And then he also, the most damning evidence. Well, the most damaging allegation that he makes is that he said that the Miami Dolphins owner, Stephen Ross, offered him $100,000 for every loss that the team sustained because he wanted to get a higher draft pick. And so um, that brings the question of coaching, integrity, morality, racial discrimination. All of those things come right into this. Really, if you haven't been turned on TV, you've seen this story going on. So, Doc, before we play our interview with Brian Shaw, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, it was a Rosa Parks moment.
Mm.
When she said, "I'm not going to sit here anymore." He knew that when he made this statement, that his coaching career was over. But I think what was lost in the shuffle is that 70% of the players in the NFL are black. The coach is so critical. And just to kind of discuss that a little bit, because a lot of you are involved in situations where, you have coaches that are either non-minority or who just don't understand what their role is. And the reason it's on our program is because, your children who are playing these sports are in very vulnerable areas. And so we did talk with Coach Brian Shaw, who has coached the Clippers, has been previously the head coach of Denver for always I think it's called the Black Patients 1 year, and but now he is an assistant coach. And let's see what he has to say a little bit about coaching. And certainly, if you've got children, this is an important segment. So let's see, Coach Brian Shaw, who is now coaching with the Los Angeles Clippers. And we're glad to have him here. He's homegrown here in the Bay Area, grew up here. I think I may have taught him a couple moves somewhere along the line, but I don't remember. I can't go back that far, but he's been a very distinguished player in college and played in the pros, coached both in Denver, coached with the Lakers, and has been, I think, a shining example of what an athlete should be about here in the Bay Area, both with his, in terms of carrying himself professionally, but also in his contribution to this community. So, Brian, welcome to our program, and congratulations on your new position. Important for a kid. No, I'm not talking about you, Mr. Dean. What are some of the important characteristics that parents should look for in a coach, regardless of sport?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I put in this kind of in the same category, coaches, parents, and teachers. Right. I think that they're all pretty equivalent when it comes to dealing with children. And so the same things that you would want in yourself as a parent, you should want that in a coach or in a teacher. Integrity, a value system that you believe in, positively impact your child. What I do think is missing, especially here in the United States, is a certification program. There's levels to it in terms of the development of where your child is at 6 to 10 years old is going to be different, once you get to 11 to 15, and then, and so on as you rise up in age. And so I think that, Dr. Lenore, you just said it. You have a lot of amateurs. You have parents that are coaching teams in a lot of instances, especially when children are really young. Some that are doing it for the wrong reason. Some are volunteering their time, but they have no idea of the basics and the fundamentals that it takes to play that particular sport. And I think that because they're children, there should be a certification program that kind of stamps you and validates you as somebody who's capable of and has a pedigree to deal with children at different developmental stages. And when you'll see, different countries around the world, they have this in soccer, in particular, in different countries where coaches have to go through a program. They have to be certified in order to not only coach, but then to rise in the coaching ranks as kids get older. And I think that that's something that's missing that we have to get back to, because after all, these are our children that they're spending a lot of time with, and we got to make sure that they're doing the right things. Coaching in sports is really one of the most important positions that you can have, and that's why I talked about certification. A friend of mine who I went to elementary school, we went to school together from 5th grade all the way up through 9th grade before we split in terms of high school. He never played any sports of any kind at all whatsoever. I didn't see him for years and years and years. And then when I grew up, got married, my son was 5 years old. My friend, I bumped into him. His son was exactly the same age, 5. And he was coaching our kids' team. And I went up to him and I said, Michael, you never played sports in your life. How in the world did you end up being the coach of this? It was actually a program called the Junior Warriors. And he said to me, and this is a true story, he said, do you know how many single mothers are bringing their sons in to play basketball? And so his motive for coaching the team was to try to get at the single mothers who were bringing their kids in, right?
Wow.
And so that was the first time in my mind that it registered to me how important it is to have, somebody who's qualified and certified
Right.
to be in that position to be coaching our kids. And so as I started to come around more and come to practice, the kids were just doing whatever they wanted to do. And you look over and you see him in the bleachers talking to all the single mothers. But that was his thing. And that's why, and then, it's a shame that you have something like that as the coach of your child's team.
It's funny, but it's sad too. And you see, because coaching really, especially at a younger age, is really about encouragement and getting them to love the game and getting them to learn the game the right way.
Yeah, well, that's kind of classic, but I still think there's much that a coach has to do. And so if you look around the league, when you got 70% of the players, and it's so pervasive that they're going to get injured or they're going to have health problems, and you don't have a coach who is sensitive to some of the issues that have to revolve around African Americans in that situation. Especially as it relates to their health. And we have we maybe have Dr. Strudwick on talk a little bit about that. He was a doctor for the Raiders for a long time. Then you are looking at a situation where you as a parent can see the same kind of thing throughout the whole system, from when your kids start in Pee Wee League all the way up through. And their health is so critical. And you have to have a coach, regardless of ethnicity, who is concerned about the health of your children. But for him to do what he did, he was concerned about the health of a whole community, the mental health. The fact that black coach had 30, all these teams and one black coach, and they tried to demonize him. Remember, they asked him, was he going to go coach UCLA? We should play his response, because his response was swift and right to the point. And that's one of the reasons we brought it up today to discuss it. And perhaps we will delve into it in a little more detail on another part of our program.
Yeah, I think ultimately, as we get ready to talk about COVID, I think ultimately for us, it becomes to the question I always had is, how do they see us? Right. So you're right. The 70+%, I think the latest number shows 73% of the league players are black. Many of the top players, including quarterbacks now, are black. And you have many black coordinators. And so the moving goalposts is not just a fantasy or something that's not real when we're talking about Black Americans and achievement. And here in Black History Month, we understand that the goalpost in terms of success and achievement keeps getting moved and redefined when a Black person achieves a certain level. And so now we're talking about getting in and leading men. Oh, it's cool to lead it when you're on the field and you're part of the soldiers, but it's another thing to lead them intellectually, mentally, teach them how to be men, get them in a situation to where you're not only telling them how to be a better football player, but you're really leading as a coach, you're teaching them how to approach life and be better men. And so for them to not trust that a black man can do this effectively, as well as lead their team and their franchise to wins, is something that's very, very telling about many of the people that own and operate these NFL franchises.
Yeah, one of the things that always intrigues me a little bit, because it does have to do to a certain mental mindset that you would elect as a football player to go to Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, states that demean you both politically and socially, and play football for these people, and then and be okay with that. I just have trouble with that, although I'm not an athlete and I don't have a career on the line or any of that. But it just intrigues me that Alabama is kind of the key. Now I can't say I don't care much about black people in Alabama. That would be unfair. I mean, that's an unfair statement.
Right.
But the fact that they have such a history of racial discrimination, Georgia, these other places, and that they depend upon African American players, and it becomes this big part of their culture. And yet, what must a player think when he's down there and playing for those schools, and all around him is this aura of segregation? It must have some kind of mental impact. It has to.
Probably not as much as we think, because when they're there, they're treated as kings, right? They get everything opened up to them. They're treated as a citizen, as a traditional normal citizen is being treated. They're being treated as, hey, you get to lead our school and our program to this great height of success. And so I think it is a bit ironic that the schools and that the region of the country that cares so much about the sport is, really, really silent when it comes to black head coaches. And so they get a lot out of the black players, but not a lot from our black head coaches. And so, and that region being the Southeast, and we know the history of the Southeast when it comes to this country and black people. And so it's quite ironic that they care so much about that sport, particularly football, and the people that play it, but they don't want us to lead it.
I think that it's unfair for me to make a judgment on that, because a lot of these youngsters are very intelligent, extremely intelligent. And I know some of them want to play pro ball, but most of them know by a certain age that they can't play pro ball. But talk among yourselves. The doorbell rang, and anytime the doorbell rings and open, you better see who it is.
Yeah, I think ultimately when we're talking about this situation, you're right. The players are more intelligent, and so I don't want to discount that. At the same time, we do have to recognize that when these players are getting offered by Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi State, they are playing in the SEC, and that is known to be a pipeline to the pros. And so they all have professional aspirations to play at the next level, because as we all know, getting drafted into the NFL could be life-changing in terms of your financial situation, not only for yourself, but for your family. And so are you're willing to endure, living in places where they really don't care for you outside of what you can do for the school? Are you willing to endure that? Many are, because that's where the opportunities used to be. Now, as we've seen recently, we've had some students and some student athletes choose to go to an HBCU. Deion Sanders at Jackson State has landed at least 2 top recruits in the country to go to Jackson State. Mm-hmm. And that could signal a change where the students, what'll be interesting to see over the next few years is if more top athletes out of high school choose to go to HBCUs, will they get a shot at getting a pro career? Because that'll determine. And if those players can go from Jackson State again, like Walter Payton did, to the NFL, then I believe we'll see more black athletes choosing to go to HBCUs over PWIs, which stands for predominantly white institutions.
Yeah, obviously I don't want to stretch us too far into this discussion, but what's interesting about that is that those people sitting on the bench for Alabama, for Georgia, for Clemson, Ohio State could play anywhere. And so they go to these schools because they think they have the opportunity
Mhm.
not just to get an education, but to get into the pros. And
Mhm.
and you can see the number of pro players versus the number of college players means that you even if you're a star in your school, even if you are kind of touted all over your hometown, and you go to Alabama and you sit on that bench, then you're not going to be in the pros. And not only that, 90% of the people sitting in front of you playing first round are not going to be in the pros. And so my feeling has always been, let your light shine where it shines brightest. And if you got a bunch of light shining, your little light might not shine. So that's kind of biblical, in its own way. But I just think that we need to talk to the young people to see what they're thinking about that, because I think these states continue to exclude them from every other process. But it's almost like, well, I'm not going to say that because it's not like a plantation. These kids are too smart. They must have other motives, but I think it has to affect your mindset. And I think
Well, it's opportunity, and they see that they feel like even sitting on the bench at Alabama has a better they have a better shot because they feel like they have better coaching, better facilities. They have ultimate confidence in their ability to get on the field, so they don't expect to go to Alabama to sit on the bench for 4 years. But some of them, they see that they know that the league is. Here's a funny statistic about the NFL: 50% of the players that are playing in the league right now were undrafted. So you don't have to, be drafted to be able to make it into the league and play. We know the big stars and where they were drafted from, but most of those guys on that 53-man roster were undrafted. They worked hard, but some of them went to those major schools and they get a look and they get a workout. And so they could be seeing, that going to those schools gives them a leg up versus going to a Jackson State or Florida A&M or something like that. But I think that will be changing in the next few years, and we're going to keep an eye on it.
but I think we should applaud Brian Flores. He had a future in front of him. He would have gotten another coaching job
Yes.
somewhere at some time, but I guess he woke up. He said, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore." And I think that's what.
From all descriptions, he's a man of principle, and I think that violated his principle in terms of the process not being fair.
Right.
And I think he was I think he just wanted it to be fair, and that upset him to the point where he felt like he needed to take a stand for everybody that comes behind him. And so, in terms of NFL coaching, you got to think Fritz Pollard was the first black NFL coach. That was 1921, and after his tenure, there was not another black coach until 1989. And that was Art Shell and the Oakland Raiders. So I don't think that in 50 plus years there wasn't another qualified black coach. But a big number of those years, black players weren't even allowed to be in the NFL. So we got to think about the history of the league, and then we got to look at who the owners are, how old they are, and really what the time frame of their life that when they were formulating what their true opinions of black men were.
And I think that's the larger issue. The larger issue is that it really gets down to the fact that they don't think intellectually at the core level, when the push comes to shove, to use an old school expression, that black coaches can really do the job. I mean, they give them, and some of these coaches that are not black have been hired 2-3 times, fired 2 or 3 times, and are still in positions. So I think that's something that we need to delve into a little more once we get some experts who really know what they're talking about in this regard.
But yeah, we got so excited. We ran a little bit long on that segment. So we're going to talk briefly about COVID as we're getting ready to wrap up here, as you're watching Doc and Dean Health News Now with Doc and Dean. As you can see, we're very, very passionate about our people and about how we are perceived. And so if you have any thoughts about that, please make sure you drop that in the comment section, because we really would like to know what you're thinking with regards to. I'm still laughing at Marcy putting in not the single mother magnet that Brian was talking about in his coaching segment. So finally, there have been some new updates in COVID. So Doc, where are we in our fight against COVID?
Well, let's start with some good news. The prediction by some of the people who predict that the current surge of hospitalizations should wind down by early March, with a slow decrease in patient volume, probably driven by the Omicron variant over the coming weeks. So it's probably going to start to wane. And I think we are starting to see it in my own practice. I'm not getting as many of those desperate calls as we were. But even as the cases fall, their current from their current high levels, it's unlikely that the coronavirus is going to go away.
Right.
Most of the world is unvaccinated. And so consequently, there'll come a day when this is no longer a pandemic, but an endemic. That means it's going to be around for the next 50 years, maybe to 100 years.
Right.
And we're going to have to deal with it every year, maybe somewhat in a different way. Right now, it's a 3-shot issue. We don't know how long the booster lasts quite yet, but it may be anywhere from months to years. So we have to see that process play out. But eventually, most experts feel that it'll look kind of like the flu. Every year it'll come in different phases, maybe even with different variants. Interesting about the Omicron variant, it had so many genetic changes that the experts feel that it probably developed in an area of the world where there was no testing, so that the virus could kind of keep messing around till it got to this point, and then it kind of escaped from there. But they're still looking to see. I had a question that I haven't had answered yet. Once the Omicron virus is under control, will the Delta virus come back as a major player? So we never did completely get rid of it, although Omicron has taken over some of the cellular stuff. And finally, one other piece, they're getting ready to try to recommend getting the vaccines down to age 2. That's going to be a tough sell. Looking at the numbers right now, 74% of Americans are fully vaccinated, 54% of children between the ages of 5 and a 17 are vaccinated. 24%, 54% of children between the ages of 12 and 17 are vaccinated. I'm sorry, let me go back again. 74% fully vaccinated. 54% of children between the ages of 12 and 17 are vaccinated. 24% of the children between 5 and 12 are vaccinated. And now they're going to ask you to vaccinate your children down to the age of 2. So before you revolt against that, remember, before your children are 2, they've already had 15 different vaccinations. There are some vaccinations that require 2 boosters, and that's diphtheria, polio, pertussis, tetanus, so that your children have been getting vaccinations and boosted for all of these various diseases. I go back to the point that when I first started practice many years ago, back in the dark ages of medicine, these diseases were there. I saw tetanus, I saw polio, I saw diphtheria, and consequently, they were just as prevalent in many regions as is the coronavirus. And now we never see cases of those because of the vaccine. So before you make judgment, 2, let's not go down to 2, let's not go down to 2. Well, let's not go down to 2 without the proper information, without you reading and without you making your own judgment. But don't rule it out simply because they're recommending vaccines for such small children.
Absolutely, absolutely. I cannot say it. So a couple of things as we're wrapping up here on Health News Now with Doc and Dean. A couple of things that I found interesting this week, as Doc's right. Number one, get boosted. Boosting has shown that you basically have a better chance of getting killed in a car accident than you do if you're boosted and catch COVID. So that's good news. So if you are fully vaccinated and you are eligible to be boosted, please go get boosted, because as we know, the vaccine, it wanes over time. Your antibodies wane over time. So also make sure, of course, when you're out in a public crowded places, wear your mask and keep your hands clean and away from your eyes and orifices if your hands are not clean. The other thing that I learned this week is that the vaccines, the virus, COVID, has been found in deer around the country. And so that is, and you say, well, why is that important? It's important because that means, to Doc's point, we're not losing. Coronavirus is not going anywhere. It has gotten into animal populations. And so therefore, even though it might not spread from animals to humans, that still means that coronaviruses are there. Deer are not dying. They have a few symptoms, and I guess their immune systems are built, and the way their bodies are built, it's not killing our deer population, but it is showing that the virus is very, very active at mutating and getting into as many, uh, body sources that it can. And so now it has gotten into deer, and now they're checking other animal sources. What we don't want to have happen is for the virus to enter in domesticated animals like dogs and cats and things that we keep in our homes, because then that could be a serious and significant problem. So also, finally, there are some, as we all know, that people that have comorbid conditions, diabetes, hypertension, asthma, whatnot, tend to have a stronger or more adverse reaction to coronavirus and COVID-19. And it's just interesting that people that tend to lean more to the right in terms of their political ideations are more against vaccines and viruses. So I did a quick search of the top 10 unhealthiest states. And those states are: number 1, Mississippi; number 2, Louisiana; 3 is Arkansas; 4 is Alabama; 5 is Oklahoma; 6 is West Virginia; 7 is Tennessee; 8 is Kentucky; 9 is South Carolina; and 10 is Indiana. So thinking about that, and I would say probably 9 of 10 of those states are red states, and lean conservative, and have been kind of out and against mandates and the vaccine in general, and for them to be the unhealthiest. So there is a pattern that has been developed. And so if you're living in one of those states, please, please, please do what you need to do to keep yourself safe, and don't follow the groupthink of that particular state or your political ideation. This is not about political parties. This is about public health.
Yeah,
So
I don't really understand why this is not. These sorry people in communication. It's not accessory to murder in many instances. I know that on one of the stations, they touted this. It was a highway patrolman, and he was not going to get vaccinated, and they fired him, and he was featured on this station, and then he died of COVID about
Yep.
3 months later, and they never mentioned his name.
Yep.
Never talked about it. Was never on their station. Had to be on other stations.
Well, he wasn't useful to their agenda anymore. Right?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I always think that this is murder. I mean, when you start to tell people you get vaccinated, because everybody on these stations has to be vaccinated, and yet you tell other people about the dangers of vaccine and this misinformation. However, I have one further issue. It's frustrating for me because, I love talking to people about their health, and I love understanding where they're coming from. But it's very difficult for me not to be concerned about not talking about against not getting vaccinated. But I understand it's not a good tactic. But as a doctor, it's just so frustrating to sit there and have to listen to some of the science that people perceive that they have, and to not be and to know that for me to make a communication with this person, I have to be patient and I have to be tolerant, and I will. But I want you to know in the back of my mind, man, I'm just so almost angry about this because they put so many people at risk. But in any event, I just say that, and hope that gets lost in the shuffle.
It's all good, Doc, and I feel your sentiment. So that is, we ran a little bit over time, but we got really passionate about the coaching conversation. But as you can see, we're here and we're going to provide you some great health information each week. We're here every Friday at 12 noon Eastern. That's 9 a.m. Pacific time, with your top health stories of the week here on blackdoctor.org in partnership with the African American Wellness Project. Again, please, 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 if you have any questions, if you have any topics that you'd like for us to discuss and uncover and get your stories here, please just drop it in the comment section. We'll go back and check it and follow up with you on subsequent weeks. So we'll see you next Friday right here on blackdoctor.org.